I'm Pamela. Standing here on the steps of the plaza, watching Devin being escorted out of the building he thought he owned, I can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The fog has burned off, and the sun is shining. The air smells of jasmine and justice. Devin, with a cardboard box in his hands, looks lost and defeated. He's flanked by my security guards, who usually spend their days politely asking delivery drivers to move but now look like executioners. As he stops at the curb, looking for a ride that's nowhere to be found, I know that my long-planned revenge has finally come to fruition. Let me take you back to the beginning. I inherited this campus from my late husband, Henry. He was a shrewd businessman who built this place from the ground up. He always said that the little things, like the state of the hydrangeas, could tell you a lot about a company's health. It was a typical morning in Silicon Valley. The fog was thick, heavy, and damp, smelling of eucalyptus and burnt venture capital. It was 6:45 a.m. And I was walking around the plaza, checking the landscaping. I love this time of day, when the campus feels like mine before the hordes of flashy cars and overconfident techies arrive. As I passed by the main entrance of the flagship building, which housed a trendy startup called Nova AI, I saw it. A Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, all wrapped in a sleek black carbon fiber, with custom rims that probably cost more than my first car. It was parked diagonally across two spaces, one of which was mine, marked with a faded white stencil that read "Reserved for Pamela." Just then, the glass doors of the lobby swung open, and out walked a man named Ethan. He was in his early 30s, wearing a tight-fitting sports jacket, loafers without socks, and holding two iPhones. He was the new director of operations for Nova AI. I had seen his picture on their website, usually with a quote about disrupting the industry. He didn't even look at my face. Men like Ethan never look at a woman my age unless she's holding a checkbook or a legal notice. He glanced at my work boots and my heavy canvas jacket, and then at the ring of keys on my belt. "Hey, you!" he barked. "Your facilities, right, or valet, whatever. I'm late for a meeting. Park this and don't scratch the rims or I'll have your job." He tossed the keys at me in a lazy, dismissive underhand throw. In that moment, I had a choice. I could have caught the keys and explained who I was, that I owned the asphalt he was standing on, the building behind him, and technically, the air he was polluting with his expensive cologne. But I didn't move. I just watched as the keys hit the pavement with a satisfying crack and skittered into a puddle. Ethan stopped scrolling on his phone and stared at me in pure shock, like a child who had just been told no for the first time. "Are you deaf?" he screamed. "Pick them up. That's a $500,000 machine." I took a slow sip of my black coffee from my thermos. "It's parked in a tow-away zone," I said calmly. "And you dropped your keys. You're the one who should pick them up. You think you can just treat people like this?" He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "Do you know who I am? I'm the director of operations here. I could buy and sell you before lunch." I smiled, not a nice smile, but the smile of a predator. "I suggest you move the car, Ethan. The tow trucks in this city are not kind." He spat, "Screw you. I'm leaving it there. Touch it and I'll sue. I'm going to call the management company and have you fired by noon." I told him my name, and he sneered, "Well, Pamela, start updating your resume. You're done." Then he stormed back into the building, leaving the Lamborghini as a monument to his ego. I stood there for a moment, and a cold clarity settled over me. He thought I was just the help, a nobody in his grand scheme of things. But little did he know, I was the one in control. I pulled out my phone and started a new file in my notes app, which I titled Project Lamborghini. I walked to the service entrance, swiped my master key card, and made my way to my office on the 4th floor. It's a modest place, with a solid oak desk, a view of the entire plaza, and a safe that holds the original deeds to the land. From my window, I looked down at the Lamborghini. It was a stain on my property, but it was also my opportunity. I sat down at my desk and pulled up the lease agreement for Nova AI. It was negotiated 3 years ago by their former CFO, a decent and careful man named George. I scanned the pages until I found what I was looking for, Section 14, regarding parking easements and asset conduct. I realized that Ethan had not only parked in my spot but had also breached the contract. Nova AI had moved in 8 months ago. Back then, they were run by George and a brilliant, quiet CEO. They respected the building and the history. But 6 months ago, they got a massive injection of $80 million in Series B funding. With that money came the arrogance. George was pushed out, and the new breed of growth hackers like Ethan took over. The lobby, which I had designed with a mid-century modern minimalist style, suddenly became filled with neon signs saying things like "hustle harder" and "move fast and break things." They broke the automatic blinds, the coffee machine, and scuffed the floors with their electric scooters. They insisted on riding them indoors. I tolerated it because they paid the high rent on time, but I knew they were lacking in manners and class. Around 10 a.m. A few hours after the incident with the Lamborghini, I went down to the shared cafe on the ground floor. I heavily subsidized this space to keep the tenants happy, with high-end espresso and local pastries. Ethan was at the front of the line, shouting, "What do you mean you're out of almond milk? I pay a premium for this office space, and almond milk is in the SLA." The barista, a sweet girl named Lily, who was working her way through a master's in business, looked terrified. "I'm sorry, sir. The delivery is late. We have soy, coconut, and regular." Ethan leaned over the counter, tapping his platinum credit card. "I don't do soy. Soy is bad for the environment, Lily. Do you hate the planet?" I stepped forward and said, "Sir, the grocery store is just 2 blocks away. Maybe one of your team could run over." Ethan spun around and squinted at me. "Oh, you again. The valet. Did you park my car?" I replied, "The car is where you left it." He laughed sharply. "Useless. Everyone in this building who isn't writing code is useless." He then cancelled his order and stormed out, his entourage following him like lost puppies. A junior employee from Nova AI, a young woman named Mia with tired eyes and an oversized hoodie, lingered at the counter. She whispered to Lily, "I'm so sorry," and dropped a $5 bill in the tip jar. Then she said to me, "He's a lot. HR has a file on him as thick as a dictionary, but he brings in the revenue. He's trying to get the board to approve a campus takeover. He wants to turn the courtyard into a basketball court." The courtyard was special to me. Henry had planted Japanese maples there with his own hands 20 years ago. It was a place for meditation and quiet reflection. The thought of it being turned into a basketball court filled me with cold rage. I knew then that I had to take action. 2 days later, the sound of jackhammers woke me up at 7 a.m. I was inspecting the irrigation lines on the south lawn when I heard the noise. I drove my golf cart around the corner to the guest parking lot, and there I saw 3 white vans marked Power Charge Solutions. A crew of guys was tearing up the pristine asphalt of the guest lot and trenching through a bed of ornamental grasses to lay conduit. Ethan was standing there, pointing at a blueprint on an iPad, wearing a pristine hard hat. I parked the cart and walked over. "Stop!" I yelled. "Shut it down. You can't dig here. This is a guest lot, and that wall contains the fiber lines for Building B. If you drill through that, you'll knock out the internet for the medical research firm next door, and they're doing live clinical trials." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Relax, old lady. I'm installing private EV chargers for the execs. We need dedicated superchargers. I don't care about the medical nerds. I care about charging my car in 15 minutes. I asked him if he had a permit and landlord approval. He scoffed, "I'm basically the landlord. Nova AI pays 70% of the rent in this park. I own this place. Now get out of my way before I call security. I stepped back and took photos of the trench, the severed roots, and the van license plates. I knew he was asking for trouble. That evening, there was a monthly tenant mixer in the main lobby. Usually, I skipped these, but that night, I put on a blazer over my work clothes and went down. The lobby was loud, with Nova AI taking over the event. They had brought in a DJ playing loud EDM. Ethan was in the center of a group of young admirers, holding a glass of champagne like a king. He was shouting, "I told the old hag that if she wants to stop progress, she can go work at the library. We're taking over the whole lot soon. I'm going to pave over that stupid garden in the back and put in a drone landing pad." Someone asked, "What about the lease? Doesn't the landlord have a say?" Ethan scoffed, "The landlord is some shell company. Probably some old person living in Arizona. We don't care as long as the check clears. I haven't even read the lease. Why would I? We're Nova AI. We do what we want." His words were like a red flag. I knew he was in for a big surprise. I went back to my office and called my external compliance officer, Rita. She's a chain-smoking ex-building inspector who hates code violations more than anything. I told her about the unauthorized construction and the lease violations. She said she'd be there at 6 a.m. The next day with the blueprints to bury them in red tape. Over the next 3 days, Rita and I became invisible shadows. We documented every violation we could find. There was unauthorized subletting, with a startup selling crypto mining equipment operating out of a supply closet on the 3rd floor. Ethan was charging them rent in Bitcoin, which was a direct breach of the exclusivity clause. There were also fire code violations, with the emergency exit in the West Wing blocked by a ping-pong table and a pallet of boxes. And the medical research firm next door filed a formal complaint about the noise pollution from Nova AI's brainstorming sessions. The turning point came on Thursday. I was in the lobby polishing the brass handrails when I overheard Ethan on the phone. He was saying, "Yeah, the board is pushing back on the burn rate, but I told them we have the facility locked down. I told them we own the lease on the parking structure." Yeah, I lied. Who cares? They're in New York. They're not going to fly out here to count parking spots. As long as the valuation holds until the IPO, I'm cashing out. I froze. He wasn't just a bad tenant, he was defrauding his own investors. I went back to my office and called my lawyer, Victor. I asked him, hypothetically, if a tenant claims ownership of common areas to secure funding when those areas are clearly landlord-controlled in the lease, is it fraud? He said it was piercing the corporate veil, which exposes the officers to personal liability. I asked him to prep a notice of default but not to send it yet. I needed one more thing. I needed Ethan to claim the property in front of a witness. And as luck would have it, I saw on the lobby monitor that there was going to be an international investor walkthrough on Friday at 2 p.m. Friday afternoon, a fleet of black SUVs pulled up to the main entrance. These were serious investors, from big funds and banks. Ethan was there, looking manic, wearing a suit paired with sneakers. He welcomed the investors and boasted about how they had fully integrated the facility into their workflow and had plans to expand. One of the investors, a stern older man with a British accent, pointed to the parking lot and asked about parking allocation. Ethan laughed and said, "See that Lamborghini? That's my spot. We control this entire front lot. The landlord basically reports to us." He then saw me standing nearby, holding hedge clippers, and snapped his fingers at me. "Hey, you. Get these leaves off the walkway. We're trying to have a meeting here. And try to look a little more presentable when we have guests. You look like you slept in a dumpster." The investors chuckled nervously. I felt the humiliation, but I also knew it was the moment I had been waiting for. I said, "I'll get right on that," with no emotion in my voice. As soon as they walked inside, I took out my phone and called Frank's Towing and Recovery. I told him I had a vehicle on the property in violation of posted signage, an unauthorized use of a reserved space, and repeated infractions. The make and model was a Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. Frank whistled and said it was a heavy beast. I told him I didn't want it on the street, I wanted it impounded and taken to his lot in East San Jose, behind the junkyard. He said it would be a hefty retrieval fee, and the owner would be furious. I said the owner was currently busy lying to investors. He agreed to come in 10 minutes. While waiting for Frank, I went back to trimming the hedges. I wanted the edges to be sharp, just like the clause I was about to enforce. Our lease agreement had a clause that stated in the event of repeated documented violations of parking assignments, common area usage, or safety protocols, the landlord reserves the right to remove offending property at the tenant's expense. And due to Ethan's unauthorized construction and other violations, Nova AI owed me close to $80,000 in damages and penalties. The Lamborghini, worth $500,000, was perfect collateral. Frank arrived in 12 minutes. His truck was a massive flatbed with chains that rattled like ghosts. He hooked the winch onto the Lamborghini's rear axle. The car was in park, and the parking brake was on, so the rear tires locked. The winch screamed as the Lamborghini was dragged onto the flatbed, making a noise like a wild animal being captured. Inside the glass lobby, I saw the investors and Ethan turn. Ethan's face went pale. He ran to the glass, slapping it with his palm. He looked like a trapped animal. Frank secured the chains and drove off with the Lamborghini. 3 minutes later, my office phone rang. It was Mia, Ethan's assistant. Her voice was shaking. Ethan is screaming. He says his car was stolen, and he's calling the police. I told her that the vehicle had been secured pursuant to the lease agreement regarding collateral for damages to the property. I also told her to tell Ethan to check his email, as my lawyer had just sent the notice of default. By 4 p.m. The story of the Lamborghini was all over the building. People were talking about how the landlord, who they thought was just a facilities manager, had impounded the director's car in the middle of an investor tour. The ecosystem was changing. Ethan's power, which was based on an illusion of invincibility, was crumbling. I then drafted an email from the Concerned Tenants Association, which was just me and Rita, and sent it to the general inquiry inbox of Nova AI's parent holding company, a large conglomerate in New York called Orion Capital. I attached all the photos and reports of the violations. On Monday morning, I got a call from a woman named Grace, the general counsel for Orion Capital. She said they had received the disturbing documentation and were flying a team out on Wednesday for an emergency audit of Nova AI's leadership. They invited me to sit in. I spent Tuesday prepping. I put on a tailored Armani suit that I hadn't worn since Henry died. I walked the property one last time. The spot where the Lamborghini had been was empty, but the oil stain was still there. I saw Mia outside smoking a cigarette. She looked at me in my suit and said, "You look different. Is this for the board meeting Ethan is freaking out about?" I nodded. She smiled and said, "Good luck. Give him hell." At 10 a.m. On Wednesday, the conference room on the top floor of the Nova AI building was full. 3 suits from Orion Capital sat on one side, with Grace looking like a shark in a designer suit. Ethan sat at the head of the table, sweating and looking disheveled. I walked in last. Ethan looked up, confused. "What is she doing here?" "This is a closed board meeting." Grace said, "Miss Pamela is here at our request. She is the property owner and our largest secured creditor at the moment." Ethan's jaw dropped. I stood up and presented the evidence. I showed the photo of the Lamborghini parked in the reserved spot next to the unauthorized construction, the police report for the noise violation, the fire marshal citation for the blocked exits, and the lease agreement. I explained how Ethan had breached the contract in multiple ways and that the lease was voidable at my discretion. Grace looked at the documents and then at Ethan. Ethan, effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending a formal termination review. Please hand over your badge and your company devices. Ethan screamed, "You can't do this. I built this. I am Nova AI. I said quietly, "You are a tenant and you're being evicted." Security escorted Ethan out of the building. As he stood at the curb, looking lost, a heavy diesel engine